The Duke of Monmouth's daring escape from London and his subsequent disappearance was the stuff of legend. He had to go into hiding. But where? Somewhere that would not be expected to be searched by the king's men, and somewhere owned by someone he could completely trust. That place would be Toddington Manor in Bedfordshire. It proved not only an ideal hiding place for the hunted Duke, but also a relaxing and peaceful one. For a man totally used to the comfort of royal palaces, Toddington would prove a comfortable abode. Toddington was a sprawling Elizabethan manor, full of fascinating features including vaults, priest holes, vast fireplaces, a banqueting hall, windows as far as the eye could see. Yes, it was a magnificent hiding place. An inventory made in 1644 listed most of the rooms and described their furnishings. The main room was the Great Hall in the north side. A great parlour contained a great round table, a cupboard, 2 side tables, 4 leather carpets, 17 leather chairs, 10 leather stools, and 8 griffins to hold lights on. There were 2 dining rooms, a steward's room, 4 galleries, 1 a picture gallery, and 1 containing a billiard table, a chapel, a nursery, a fencing room, a great chamber, and several other smaller chambers. The named bedrooms included My Little Lady's Chamber, Mistress's Chamber, Smith's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, Leicester's Chamber, New Chamber, Cheek's Chamber, and My Lady's Chamber, hung with fine awnings and containing a bed with damask and curtains. The great kitchen was not mentioned, although this is one of the few rooms to have survived the demolition. But it was not only the building, the grounds were breathtaking as well, with woods, lakes, well-kept gardens, circular avenues, flowing meadows, and lengthy fields for riding. But who would allow this renegade duke to hide in their home and potentially put their property and their lives at risk? It was one Henrietta Wentworth, Baroness of Nettlestead. The surname of Wentworth might not sound that important in Britain's history, nor those of her grandfather, Sir Ferdinando Carey, or her great-grandfather, Lord Hunsdon. But through these men, Henrietta's 2 times great-grandmother was one Mary Boleyn, the elder sister of King Henry VIII's second and most famous wife, Anne. Henrietta, despite her elevated family position, at the age of 8, lost her father, Thomas Wentworth, the 5th Baron Wentworth. Since then, she had lived at Toddington with her mother, Philadelphia. At the Restoration, like many other nobles, she made her debut at court. Portrayed in the first Churchills, the chaste nymph, she appeared in that masque of the same name, alongside the 2 royal princesses, Mary and Anne. Also in that play, playing a shepherd, was one James Scott, Duke of Monmouth. Even before the play, Henrietta and Monmouth surely knew each other, as Henrietta was a cousin of Monmouth's guardian when he was a boy, Lord Croft. Now during this series, I have painted Monmouth as a real hero, and I stick by that, but he was certainly no angel, particularly seen through modern eyes. At the time of the play, being married did not seem to be a barrier to Monmouth. He eyed Henrietta as a possible conquest, and she appeared to be much taken by the handsome Duke. The match between these two would have seemed quite appropriate as well, because Henrietta's family had some serious royalist credentials. The Wentworths had fought for the crown ever since the times of the conquest, and in more recent times, her grandfather had been a striking giant of a man who had a glimmering record as a royalist commander during the English Civil War. At the disastrous Battle of Worcester, both grandfather and son were at Charles's side. Even in exile, Henrietta's father was honoured with raising Charles I's foot guards, later to become the Grenadier Guards. If the Wentworths had some more money, land and influence, Henrietta may well have been betrothed to Monmouth. In her younger days, she had been linked to potential marriages to either Lord Bruce, Charles's equerry, and Monmouth's former Major General Louis de Ras, the Earl of Feversham, the man who would one day see him from the other end of a battlefield. Lord Bruce, although not marrying Henrietta, was a faithful servant of the king, and knew just how much the king loved his son. He played a crucial and faithful role in ensuring, for now, that Monmouth would not be taken. Despite the fantastic hiding place Monmouth had chosen, spies were already reporting back to London. The king, despite aggravation from his Tory supporters, and particularly the Duke of York, would not be budged and insisted that he did not want Monmouth arrested. When plans were put in place for Monmouth's arrest, Bruce voiced his concerns to the king. He said, "The house is surrounded by ponds, that there were many vaults and underground passages by which he might escape, and if I raised a militia troop, he would hear of it." Apparently the king was content with this excuse, and he never spoke to me more on this subject. Bruce was now asked to take on the temporary role of the governor of Bedfordshire, reported a strange tale centring on Toddington. Bruce was out hunting one day and recalled, "The stag swam the ponds at Toddington, which never happened before. I saw a tall man in a country habit opening a gate for me. I took no notice, but casting my eye, perceived it was the Duke of Monmouth, who was so indiscreetly mingled with the crowd at the death of the stag very soon after." Bruce then kept talking to his companions in a loud, distracting voice, so as to allow Monmouth to slip away unnoticed. Bruce also recounted a story about a dinner at Toddington. "Philadelphia invited myself and Lord Aylesbury to dinner, but she never permitted us to see the apartments above." He continued in describing a friend who had visited later, and they had managed to sneak upstairs. The friend reached Henrietta's door, and it being open, saw a tall, handsome young gentleman sitting in a great chair by the fireside, watching Henrietta dress. Ever since that moment, that bedroom was called the Duke's and my lady's parlour. But why did these two individuals click so perfectly? Perhaps Henrietta was a dreamer, a bit like Monmouth, and her fantasies were to escape her domineering mother. They had shared interests. She, just like Monmouth, had been brought up in a military household, full of heroic tales of daring do, adventure, battles and bloodshed. Henrietta would assuredly recount tales of her father and grandfather after the defeat of Worcester and the future king's famous hiding place in the Boscobel Oak. Monmouth would then retell his days of glory, Lowestoft, the Dutch raid on the Medway, Maastricht, Mons and Bothwell Bridge. She enjoyed life, the horses, the outside, hunting, music, and being in the company of such a humorous and handsome soldier. She must have felt she was the luckiest woman in the country, having the attention and devotion of the most famous man in England. How they would have spent those days in each other's arms, laughing, playing and reminiscing about the good old days. It must have seemed like a dream for the pair of them, especially Henrietta, who was hypnotised by Monmouth's voice, so well described by Dryden. "Few words he spoke, but easy those and fit, more slow than high blood drops, and far more sweet." Monmouth too, despite his troubles and his unclear future, would write in his pocket-book about what Toddington and his mistress meant to him. "The place is free from tumult and discontent. Here is no flatteries nor strife, hence gentle peace and love doth flow." There was no responsibility, no politics, no backstabbing, no tussles for power. It was a haven for the war-ravaged Duke. Again, in his pocket-book, which was taken after his capture after the Battle of Sedgemoor, he wrote about Henrietta and what she meant. He wrote, "Life would be happier, shared with another." It shows his love for this new beau, but also reflects on the hollowness of his own marriage with Anna, a marriage of state and money rather than love. As the heady days passed at Toddington, like many Stuarts, his hair began to turn grey prematurely. Vain as any Stuart courtier, Monmouth was not happy with this. He turned to a strange concoction, a 17th century version of Just for Men. To make the hair grow black, though of any colour, take a little aqua fortis. Put therein a groat or sixpence, as to the quantity of the aforesaid water. Then let both dissolve before the fire. Then dip a small sponge in the water, and wet your beard or hair therewith, but touch not the skin. But this slight greying did not dampen his or Henrietta's spirits. They still prayed together, spent long hours lost in the books of Toddington's library. They collected fruit, they fished, and even carved their names like lovelorn teenagers on the bark on the now famous Toddington oak. And yet, despite this heavenly existence, the nagging burden that had held him down, held him back, the burden of being the potential heir to the throne, was still an unanswered conundrum. Could he still become king? Could he fulfill his true destiny? Had he deserted his loyal followers, true men who had served him well, who were now in the Tower, or had paid the ultimate price already? He must have still been full of frustration, for he was a man who had commanded armies, victorious armies. He had faced death on multiple battlefields. He had been lauded by not only his father the king, but the most powerful king in Europe, the Sun King, Louis XIV. He had so much more to give, so much more to do. He couldn't just end his days here in the arms of his beloved Henrietta. But how could he repair this situation? His friends and powerful supporters were all dead, or had fled, or were in hiding. His uncle, the Duke of York, was all powerful in court, and would do his best to keep Monmouth from a reconciliation with his father. Or should he, despite all the ports being closely watched, get to the Netherlands and accept an offer he had previously received to command a Spanish army? Whatever he did now, it was vital he did not get arrested, even though his father had privately condoned it. The Earl of Argyll, a fellow plotter, now safe in exiled Holland, wrote to a friend, "If the Duke of Monmouth be made prisoner, he is lost to all intents and purposes." Argyll's main fear was that Monmouth's cause was the Protestant cause, and without him, all was lost. If Monmouth was taken, the fear for all the exiles was he would be forced into making confessions that would drag even more of his followers to the gallows. In our next episode, Monmouth will be given the opportunity to beg for forgiveness from his father, and more importantly, his uncle, the Duke of York. Will this last chance save Monmouth and bring him back to the side of his father, who missed him so much? For that story, we must wait for our next episode. As always, thanks for watching.